Today we're continuing our series Word to the Wise, and we're looking at this subject of wisdom, and really, how that speaks to us, what the Bible's got to say to us people living in 21st century Britain today. When we think about wisdom, one of our greatest frustrations as human beings is our need to, but inability to, our need and inability to impart wisdom to help us realize a better future. There seems to be a pill for almost everything these days, and you can get surgery to implant almost any part of your body, but the idea that you can pass on wisdom escapes us. We're unable to do it, and it frustrates us greatly as we think about maybe as we're conscious of the benefits of wisdom. We live inside of that, and we ache in the absence of being able to pass it on. We think particularly about, or as I think about this, I think about being a parent who has experienced stuff, and can they look at his kids and see the future in front of them, and see like the own errors of my life, and be desperate to impart some wisdom, to almost want to just give them some wisdom serum, if there was such a thing. Can you imagine if there was such a thing? Give them, impart this wisdom in order that they might blossom and embrace what's in their future. And we feel the ache of being able to do that. We think particularly at the moment when we look into the Middle East and we see the bombs going back and forth, and our heart, do you watch that and think, oh man, we ache, and we see people brutally affected by the judgments of a few people, hundreds of thousands, losing their homes, and we would wish to be able to impart wisdom there. We want to say, look back at history, look at what war does, look at how this stuff plays out. How have we not learned this? And we ache, don't we, in the absence of being able to just pass this wisdom on. The passage that we're looking at today, the text, primarily our proverb text is Proverbs 4:20 to 27, and it's Solomon imparting wisdom. That's the nature of it. He's passing his wisdom on, and we see him very much. I think we see him under the surface all the way through the book of Proverbs as a father and a king passing on wisdom to heirs, princes, and sons. I think a lot of it we should view through that lens, but we see particularly in this text, and it becomes a real. We've talked about this idea of a black mirror all the way through our look at Proverbs. It becomes a real reflection, I think, of what we do with wisdom, how we seek to pass it on. And we see Solomon very much in parental mode. So just read with me verse 20 and 22. Have a look at that. He says, "My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Don't let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and health to one's whole body." Do you see that? We see Solomon very much in parent mode, and as I read through that, I realize it's one of the things that happens to you as you progress through life. If you become a parent, you look back on all the ways that your parents influence you and some of the wisdoms that they said, and you find yourselves regurgitating what stuff that you thought you'd never say. And Solomon here is in that spot where he looks at his loved ones and he wants to safeguard their future, and he does something that we do all the time. He says things like, "I want you to really listen to this." So this becomes when you're in a position of care over people, if you're a teacher or if you're a parent, that kind of thing. You say things like, I want you to really listen to this, and I'm only saying this because I love you and I want what's best for you. We find ourselves in this spot, don't we? And if you look through the rest of those verses, you see that sort of repeating over and over again. The idea that we future-proof with these instructions. And Yeah, you'll notice as you read through it, the way that Solomon references body parts. And at first, he focuses on the body as he seeks to provide wisdom. And at first you think that's quite weird, but actually you reflect, this is another one of those things that you do when you're a parent or somebody in care. You realize a sense, I guess, in a sense, that there's you out of love and care, you look towards the future for people that you want to pass on wisdom to, and you see all the variables, uncontrollable variables of life that are out there, and you say to yourself, I'm going to influence and be wise where I can. So I'm going to seek to control all the things that are really visceral to people: eyes, ears, hands, all that sort of stuff. Do you see that in the text? That's what Solomon's going for. Is that I can't control everything, but here's how I'm going to impart wisdom to you. My mum used to say to me, she used to say things like, watch what you say. Do you remember? Do you say that? Are you in a parental position? Do you say that, or do you remember that being said to you? Look where you're going. Or this is what I say at the moment all the time. Proper old manny. You need to be more focused. You see that? You see that in the text? Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Solomon's saying, this is how you're going to be wise. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet and be steadfast in all your ways. Don't turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. All those, as I read, I've got so much. This is so relatable, I think, as somebody who looks out at the world, as a citizen, or looks out at the world as a parent and wants to pass on wisdom. This is one of the ways that we do it. We talk like this, don't we? And we notice as we do this, I think, that our wisdom, the wisdom that we hold really dearly, is to try and guard our future with rules and guidelines and mantras. It's a way that we think we've figured out to be wise, isn't it? So I have, and as I sort of wanted to pass on this wisdom, one of the things I realized was that in a pretty sad dad kind of way, I've got mantras on my phone, on just to help me along, and it really works. These mantras are really great, and they're just really simple things, but I sort of they're really helpful. I hang on them, just go for a run. My phone says to me all the time. Stop and think. My phone says to me all the time. These little pithy bits of wisdom. But one of the things that I've noticed, I noticed this particularly as I guess reflecting on it this week, I was listening into a 5 Live debate, as is my way, particularly on my day off on a Wednesday. As I potter, I'll have 5 Live on, and they were the debates often go the same way on 5 Live. They start out talking about an issue, and then they open the phone lines up, and then everybody jumps in and has their say. And it's often nobody else in my house likes these debates, but I kind of like the comfort of the background noise. Anyway, this particular debate got me because the first phone call wasn't just somebody letting off steam. The first phone call was really pertinent to the issue. They were talking about how we can be wise and govern well, and the subject matter was something to do with knife crime. And this lady rang in straight away, and she said, this morning my son's been on the way to school. My son was attacked by 2 kids with knives, and they wanted to take they took off him some of his gear. And I went into the school, and the school couldn't really do anything, and I phoned the police, and the police couldn't really do anything. So it was really engaging debate. Your heart's going out to this lady, and then you wait for the phone to open up, and it's a really helpful debate. People they're ringing in all the time, and they're saying, and it often goes this way on 5 Live. It's, well, we need earlier intervention. So how old's this kid? This kid's 11. And how old's the kids that are attacking this kid? They're 14, 15. Yeah, we need to educate them younger, and we need to educate them more, and we need better laws and more policing. And if you've listened to the radio, you'll know how this stuff works. Everybody sort of pipes up. Some of it's really helpful. Some of it's like people just letting off steam, having a rant and that kind of thing. And we do this thing where you realize as you listen to this, one of the things that humans do is we try and future-proof with rules and guidelines like that. And it's wise to us, and it is wise. But as I listened to this radio debate, one of the things that became really clear was that these rules, they don't lead to the wisdom or the outcomes that we need. This debate will be, there'll be the same debate next week, more than likely. And this is, I guess, one of the reasons my wife says, don't listen to this rubbish, because there's a sense in which it's like a black hole that just goes round and round and round as people venture their opinions. And you realize that actually, though it's good to talk, these debates don't bring light at the end of the tunnel. There's no, there's still a kid that's going to be attacked with a knife tomorrow. It just shows us where we're at, and it takes us down this never-ending VAR style rule keeping black hole that we just argue about and can't really enforce, and so lose heart. And if you're really tuned into the sermon, and if you're listening to the sermon, maybe what you're saying at the moment is, hang on a minute, Ash. I thought that we were, where are we going with this talk? I thought we were looking at a book that was loaded with pithy wisdom and really good sayings. And I thought the nature of that book, I thought what you're telling us is we've got to hang our lives on this stuff. Is that not what you're telling us? I thought the idea was that we made these mantras for life. What exactly are you telling us? And you're saying, maybe if you've read the Bible a bit, I'm sure I've read Leviticus, that's got like a gazillion rules, pretty much nothing but rules. I'm sure I've read about a bearded fella who climbed a mountain and got 10 really important rules. I'm sure I've read about that. Are you saying the wisdom is to ditch the rules? Are you saying they don't matter? Are you saying I can do what I want? And what do I do with that? Watch yourself stuff. What do I do with that wisdom? Where do I go with that? What am I supposed to look at? Do I just ignore that? What do I do with that? One of the things that we really want to try and communicate when we look at any Bible text is the big story of the Bible. The Bible is ultimately one big story. Loads of little books, but no matter what their subject matter, and some have some pretty random subjects, or so it seems. This one's wisdom, really. No matter what their subject matter, they're all ultimately part of this big canon, telling this, somewhere down the line, telling this big story. Even though Proverbs is getting, is imparting wisdom, the big message of the Bible is about the way that God redeems and saves the world through Jesus. That's what the story is about. So what Jesus does doesn't undermine any of this law. Jesus is at pains to say that, and Paul backs him up if you read through Romans. But it means, as we read the Bible, that there are moments in this big story when the pithy wisdom that we've picked up roundabout, and we think, oh, that's really helpful, that sort of how to live wisdom bumps into our bigger need, the bigger need that human beings have of outside rescue. It bumps into the bigger storyline that is people are being rescued. Do you see that? So these books all dotted around have got these different subjects in. One of them, the one that we're looking at, is wisdom. But we know in the bigger story that this is going to bump into the need for human help and human hope. So I just want to leave before you just two occasions where you see that stuff bump into each other into the future. So the first one is a story, like you might know this. It's a story of the rich young ruler. It's in Luke 18, and it starts in verse 18. I'll read it to you, and then I'll show you what I'm getting at. This is an occasion where, the wisdom, where we're caused to rethink again, or we're caused to think again about how we deal with this pithy wisdom that's helpful. Luke 18, excuse me. A certain ruler asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus often answers with questions. Why do you call me good? Jesus answers, no one is good except God alone. You know. So Jesus looks at him and he knows what he's thinking. You know the commandments. You know the pithy wisdoms. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. Honor your father and mother. And he says, all these I've kept since I was a boy. I think I said that a lot more Yorkshire than is there. As it's supposed to be read. He said, verse 22, when Jesus heard this, he said to him, you still lack one thing. You still lack one thing. Sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. When he heard this, he became very sad because he was very wealthy. We'll drop it there. We'll come back to that text, but we'll just park it there for a second. Do you see what's going on in that story? Here we have this influential, dashing, loaded guy that's not just loaded and dashing and influential, but actually he's kept all the rules. He's kept all the rules in terms of people that you want on the Christian team. You know, sometimes you'll be like, who do we want to come into church to give us a bit of a lift? This guy is the guy that you want. This dashing, good-looking guy is everything you would want on your team. And sort of disciples are looking on going, well, we might be cast into the shadows if this guy joins the team. But the framing question over this little dialogue is, notice what it is. What can I do to inherit eternal life is the question. What can I do? And remember how we've thought about what we're looking for in wisdom. What can I do to guarantee my future is the question. And Jesus says to him, and it's brilliant and brutal. He says to him, this guy that's dashing and kept all the rules, you know, sell all you've got and follow me. What does he do? He exposes this man and he reveals to us that living a righteous life is a heart issue. Living a good life, living the wisest life is a heart issue. Jesus exposes this guy's heart when he says to him, sell all that you've got. When he says to him, sell all you've got, he's not just being cruel. What he's saying is, disciples listening in, people reading in thousands of years' time, this is a heart issue. Now, what I want you to do, it just makes really clear, I think, that the rules that we turn to don't lead to the wisdom and the outcome that we need. And I just, as I see this, if you read through the text, pick up the text in verse 24 with us now. You've got this almost picture of the disciples, and I want you to almost freeze frame them. You can almost see them. I think if we were to recreate this as some sort of trendy video, you'd have all the disciples just like eyebrows stuck to their hair. Just if that would be the freeze frame, because they're completely confused. See what they say? Jesus looked at him and said, he says to them, and this is what blows them away, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. Indeed, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, eyebrows in the air, than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. Those who heard this asked, who then, and this is the disciples, who then can be saved? The disciple, freeze frame them. They're just like, what the heck? Who then can be saved? And Jesus says to them, what's impossible for man is possible for God. He says to them, I'm gonna prioritize with my ministry, and I'm gonna act in such a way that means people have got to orientate all of their actions from their heart. That's what it says. Another story I want us just to look at, the second story. This is like the last story. It's in Luke 7, verse 36 to 47. You might know this story too, you might not. Let me read it out to you. So this is a bit of I don't know how this is going to come across, but if you're watching it on your phone, it's quite a long text, but it's just an amazing story and a really helpful story for trying to wrestle with some of this stuff. Luke 7, 36 to 47. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then She wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. There's just this picture of this woman completely losing herself in the moment, just pouring out, just like something like flow. I'll use this word, flowing out of her. Where am I in the text? I might have to read it again. I think I've lost mine. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed him, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man really was a prophet, he'd know who's touching him and what kind of woman she is. She's a sinner. And Jesus, and you can read, knowing his thoughts, says, Simon, I've got something to tell you. And he says, tell me, teacher. And so he tells him a story. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back. So he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon replied, a bit coy. Do you read that in his reply? I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. He's been owned. Oh, there's another expression for it now. And I can't remember what it is. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. The kids will be screaming it at the TV. Then he turned towards the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You didn't give me any water for my feet. Jesus is saying, you didn't know really who I was when I came in. But she wet my feet with her tears, and she wiped them with her hair. You didn't give me a kiss. But this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You didn't put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. Whoever has been forgiven little, loves little. Whoever has been forgiven much, loves much. This woman walks in and you say, this is the last person. The rich young ruler is the first guy that you want on your team. This woman comes in to the scene, as it were, and you think to yourself, this is the last person that we need here. This is the last person that's going to help evangelize the world. This is the last person that you'd expect to be living a wise life or is making wise decisions. But in this story, this woman has realized who Jesus is. She's realized that he brings hope to her. He might even be her only hope. And because of that, her heart is moved and her love flows out of her. Her actions, born from the heart, even though you look at them and you go, I'm not sure that's in the Christian textbook. I'm not sure that the way she's carrying on is in the textbook. Jesus says, this is a wise way to live. And the love flows out of it. What does it say at the core? I don't know if we can get this text back up. What does it say at the core of this proverb that we've been reading? There's all these pithy instructions. Then right in the middle, there is the key way to understand the whole thing. The key way to understand how to live wise. It says, above all else. Verse 23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. It's one of those verses that means you've got to put it above everything else because everything else is dependent on it. Above all else, guard your heart because everything that you do flows from it. God says to us in his word, when you're weighing up how to live wise, when you're thinking about what the rules are, when you're playing over in your mind how well you've kept them, and you're looking at other people to sort of see how well they're keeping them, God says in his word, remember the guy that never put a foot wrong, but had no heart for God. Remember him. And remember the woman who couldn't seem to do a thing right, who fell in love with the God that could forgive her. And her wisdom flowed out of her actions. If your heart's moved, I think that's the message. I think that's the message of the big picture. in terms of wisdom. If your heart's moved, then your actions will invariably move with them and become wise with them. When you don't, let's just to play this out a little bit more, just to see how it looks in real life, just so I emphasize the point. When you don't just fancy somebody or like somebody or are going out with somebody, but when you fall in love with somebody, and there's like loads of dating advice out there, isn't there? When you absolutely are head over heels, when your heart's gone for that person, in that situation, if you're madly in love with a person, to go back and read about the dating advice, to read a manual on how you engage a man or a woman, and then you went and carried out those actions, if you were already in love, it just looked weird. It's so inferior to the actual natural love that's just, and the natural action. It would look unwise. When you don't just routinely give to charity, but you are heartbroken when you look across the world and you see the kid on the telly in Palestine with who's lost his mum and dad and he's got nothing. When your heart's broken like that, you can almost become instantly wise. If your heart's broken for this, if you look at this person and your heart's gone out to them, the wise actions are going to follow. The Bible has rules and rule books as long as your arm. Leviticus, you might say, could be a cure for insomnia. Sometimes it can get anyone off to sleep. It's got rules for everything. But when you realize, as this woman realized, what the story is, when you realize who God is, when you realize who you are in light of God, and your heart's moved, then like this woman, even some of the hardest rules to keep. Do you know that way when you fall in love with somebody, even stuff that's just insanely tough that if you were to look at in the manual, you'd go, I'm not doing that. Not going to that trouble. I forget it. I'll not have a boyfriend, or I'll not have a girlfriend. I'm not going there. But when you're in love, you're already there. God says to us in his word, and I really hope this is helpful, and I hope this helps us put some of this stuff together. When you're weighing up how to live wise, when you're faced with a future of unknown variables that you can't always do anything about, when you're wondering right now what to say to your kids, when you're wondering how to deal with the pithy wisdom of what should I look at, what should I do with my hands, what path should I choose, God says to us in his word, if you start with a heart that's moved by God, if your salvation story is real, then you'll be okay. Hey,
Hi,
buddy.
Ash. You all right?
Hiya.
You okay?
I'm all right. I'm good.
Good. It's just me and you today.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It might just be me and you.
Well, if you're listening now, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for staying with us.
Thank you. No, thank you for that message, Ash. And I think in terms of what you said about the parent mode, I think that was really helpful in terms of Solomon and speaking to his heirs, I suppose. So how did that make you feel when you were? I think you said a little bit about that, but how did it make you feel when you were kind of reading that? Because I could have read that 20 to 27 to my kids and saying, look, this is something you need to.
Yeah, it did make me think about. It definitely made me think about being a parent, and it made me aware of, particularly that. Do you know that way when you start to find yourself saying what your parents have said, or all the all the people that have brought you up, when you start regurgitating that sort of advice. Yes, I definitely thought, I do all this. I say, keep your eyes on this, and it is born out of a real heart to shape the future. But I think you are aware. One of the things I'm becoming increasingly aware of is just you do have a great influence over your kids, but there's limits in terms of how you can safeguard them. And I feel like you are increasingly heading towards that point where you've got to equip them to be able to live on their own and And I find this kind of message really helpful, because essentially you can sort of hammer, you know, you can do this as a teacher or anything. You can hammer people, but unless people buy into it, unless you've got buy-in, you know, that kind of idea.
Yeah.
And that's what you're hoping for from your kids, isn't it? You're hoping that they don't just remember the rules, that they get buy-in, that they go, all right, I see what you're saying about this. I do see that it's really important. So I think ultimately you've got to head towards the heart, or your message is loads less powerful. I don't know if you've had that in your life, Bodie, when something's actually spoken to your heart, actually you're a million times more motivated than if you just get in, you know, if you just sat there, for example, in a biology lesson, and you just getting hammered with facts, and then you go into your next lesson and the teacher just invigorates you, and it's something to do with, you know, for example, climate change, and they say something that really gets under your skin. Like when you've got to do the homework on that, actually you find it's just like, oh, I care. I've got buy-in, and I care about this. Yeah. And you know, there's maybe a different kind of a journey that goes on, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think even I used to work in a school, and it was a case of, they always used to say hearts and minds to the kids, because the kids buy into it, then you, in theory, should be easier, but and to other people as well. But and I just think in terms of, you know, the heart, it not being, you know, our physical heart, but our, well, in fact, a question, it would, you know, what would you say that would be? Would it be our kind of sense of direction? It's the sense of it's us, it's our kind of, because we say to the heart, and we always say to the heart of the matter and stuff, but how do you define that really? And how does the Bible really kind of define that heart type of terminology? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's the stuff that cuts through. I think that's how it defines it. It's the stuff that really cuts through, because I think one of the things you've got to look back on is Jesus is at pains to say, I'm not coming here to alter all that law. I've not come to do that. What I have come to do is for you to realize what all that is about. So it doesn't. One of the things that I tried to be careful to do in the preach was not diminish like how incredibly wise Solomon's words were. I think Jesus doesn't even come to do that, but he does come to say, this is what it's all about. Actually, this is what really makes sense of it. So yeah, I think it's about in the big storyline. It's about the way that Jesus cuts through, and I'd say that's how you could describe it. There's loads of wisdom, and then Jesus cuts through, and you go, all right, okay, I see what this looks like now. I see what God's trying to do. I see what this parent of mine. Have you ever had any of those moments when you're growing up? When you reflect on all the stuff that your parents have imparted on you, and then you have these moments where you go, hang on, is that what they were you know? And maybe you can only see this years down the line. You go, is this what they were trying to teach me? I just thought they didn't want me to have any fun. You know, I just didn't think they wanted me to go. I thought they wanted to confine me to the estate, and I couldn't play out any further than that. And I thought there was just like some nasty cruelty going on. It wasn't because they actually really love me and they know about the greater dangers that are out there. And you sort of have that moment of revelation. I think you could look at the Bible and say it's that kind of thing. It's a revelation of the wisdom of God that you see in Jesus when you go, oh, I see what that's about. I see what these rules are really heading towards. I'll try, I'll bear them in, I'll see them for what they're worth, the wisdom, and I'll try and hold them, but I won't think that that's what it's all about. Otherwise you become like the kid who just gets cynical and just ends up thinking because I think a lot of people, you can look at religion that way and you can go, is it just about confining me to do this? And actually it's not. It's about liberating you. But that's yeah,
absolutely. And in the Bible, so it says God, our Father, it's a parental type of, in terms of the language, what it uses that when we have young children or older children, we are not trying to spoil their fun. But that's what I used to think.
What was that verse you shared, by the way, Boydie? Because I was aching to coin some of my sentiments in a nice, concise verse, and I feel like you went in and just like the great, you just nailed it with that verse. That was a really helpful verse.
John 7:38. but it's from, and I'll promote as well. It's from the Gospel Transformation Bible, if everyone says that's good.
Yeah.
So obviously with the Proverbs, it says everything, because you mentioned about the big story, about that kind of redemptive story through the Bible. So, within this version of the Bible, it says every story where the gospel is plays that part, I suppose, and it's the bigger story of that. So John 7:38. And where Jesus says, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water, and it's just.
No, I found that really helpful, and I think that's when you coined that. I thought back to what I was hoping would come across about the story of this woman, who it looks, to use that word flow, it does look like her actions are just flowing out of her, just like protrude, like she's not. It's just like this limitless, like this. Oh, it's not forced. You realize as you watch it, this is just an outpouring, and
absolutely, organic.
It's organic, and actually that becomes something that's, she realizes a lot of the ideals in those moments, even in a what must look like a really weird kind of way. What this Old Testament was striving for. God says over and over again, I'm looking for relationship. I'm looking for relationship. It's about relationship. And this unlikely character in the New Testament absolutely has this moment where she's like, I get it. She gets what it is, and the wisdom flows out of her. And it was just, I thought that's a great thing for us to think about, how helpful that can be, actually, because often we work at the disciplines. Some part of being a human being, because it's all around us, perhaps we're conscious of, right, what do I have to do to make this work? What can I? And I'm, in lots of areas of life, I'm just the same. You look at I look at the mantras on my phone and I go, right, what have I got to do in order to live this sort of life that I think's going to be profitable and helpful? And there's a level of wisdom in that, but that all, like, almost, it pales into insignificance when it's an authentic thing in your heart. You don't have to check your phone. If you don't have to check your phone for how to live, if you woke up that morning and you've been completely blown away by the reality of your faith or the walk that you've got with this creator God, or or that's
definitely. And I think you see it as well, and we've been privileged to see that with new Christians, people who have come to faith and to just bursting and want to tell everyone and just excited, and it's an organic thing. And I think we want to have that, obviously, when you've been a Christian for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But there are some times, isn't there? I think you've mentioned it a little bit, where you have to work at that a bit, and your heart, you take things for granted. And I mentioned at the start about remembering what God has done for you, and what he will do for you in the future. And would you say we have to work at some things? There has to be some disciplines in terms of that. And if you do have to work at it, that's not a bad thing. That, just as you have to do exercise, or you have to. Do you know what I mean? Just because it's not organic, you're not jumping from the ceiling all the time, doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Does that make sense? Yeah,
and you do have these conscious. Definitely looking back on my Christian life, I've definitely had moments where I've thought, is God, does he feel as real as he have done at other times? Do I know him as near? What do I have to let me get back? But I think one of the things we've got to be careful to do is, do I get back to the rules? Or because I think the answer is, there's loads of them there. In some respects, yes. But if you only get back to the rules and lose the heart, you've had it, ultimately down the line.
Definitely.
So whatever you're looking at needs to move your soul.
Absolutely.
I think.
Awesome. Yes. Well, thank you, Ash. No, that's really good. And we pray, anyone who's listening, that your hearts are moved. And that's not because of the clever words that we've said. Absolutely not. It's because of what God has done. And, it's only Jesus that can transform your heart, and where living water flows out from it. And give God the praise for that. And that's a great thing.
Yeah, it is not down to us. I think just to pick up on this idea of wisdom, I think God, he does. We're called to be wise, I think we're really, you know, and there's incredible. One of the things I would say is there's incredible wisdom in knowing ultimate things. I don't think that undermines being smart, having common sense. But I think if that's underpinned by, there's a God who sits above all this, we're created beings, those sorts of things, I think that's a really helpful. Because I think if you don't have that, then I think your footings for wisdom are skewed.
Yeah. Cool. Great. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week. God bless.
God bless.